Welcome back to the Biff Bites podcast. I'm Adam. Today we are discussing common behavioral biases with Brendan.
Yeah, so we're gonna sit here. We're gonna talk about staying sane in this insane environment. So we've got a lot of things up in the air. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of polarization between what people think and how strongly they feel about what they think, and it's all leading to I think people being nervous and primed for mistakes. So we're going to talk about behavioral biases.
Excellent. And I thought this was really interesting. Would you mind sharing the results of that study just to kick things off?
Yeah. So there was a study that was done. It's a little aged right now. It's 2019, but I would argue, and I'll talk a little bit about what I would perceive as the changes to be. But it looked at behavioral finance in financial planning and investment management practices. And it asked the question, one of the many questions it asked was, what are the most common biases that you as the advisor or the planner see in your clients? And the top three, in the order that they were received, is the top bias is recency bias. And recency bias basically says, hey, what I'm seeing right now and in the near past is what I think is going to happen into the future, right? And that's obviously could be very dangerous right now because, March 2020, when the whole thing kind of fell apart, is way in the rearview mirror. And so people, I think, are really underestimating necessarily the risk that might be out there. The second one, ironically, is loss aversion. So, and it's amazing how in a market like we've had, one bias can cause you to create the next thing that you're afraid of, right? So you can just suck yourself into this vortex of hope based on what you've seen and immediately walk yourself into the monster that you're afraid of, which is losing. But I'm sure buying the market at all-time highs is never going to be a problem with that. And then the last thing is confirmation bias. Basically, we go and we look for things that support the argument we're making. We look for the articles. We only read the things that agree with our line of thought. And I would argue that, so I said that while this is a couple years old, and I think in normal times would be about what it always is, I think confirmation bias is probably worse now.
And why do you think that is?
Because we got a lot of issues that are binary. And people are really passionate about. We've got blue versus red. We've got the masked versus unmasked, vaxxed versus unvaxxed. And there's very passionate arguments on both sides. And it makes the no man's land of World War I seem like Disneyland, right? So I think that void is widening, and people are so steeped in what they believe that there's really no chance of an olive branch getting pushed across.
And that's, the stuff that we consume, and I'm sure with everyone just having such instant access to information these days, you can find some article somewhere, right, that's going to support what you believe, and
a score of them, and without even having to consider that maybe there's a counterpoint out there.
Yeah, right.
We've got these validation cycles, these echo chamber on both sides of every issue, and it's created this risk where I think that people aren't necessarily seeking enough information to make some of the decisions. And it's true of investing. So I'm speaking specifically about their investments. Hey, I can go find 100 things saying the market, despite the fact that its average return has been triple of its historical average, is still vastly undervalued, right? It's still vast. I can find plenty of articles that support that, and they'll have all kinds of fancy pictures and numbers to support their argument. And I think you can go and find the exact opposite, where we're going to go back to trading clothes for furniture, and there'll be plenty of support for those arguments as well.
So let's hone in on this one, confirmation bias. In your experience, do you look for this? Are you looking for this when you're working with clients?
No, I think this has been true for some time. I think I concede to it. And where it really has historically manifested itself has been in a couple of areas, at least in my practice. So I've seen people where I can't have more than a certain amount of my money in stocks because stocks are bad, right? And they'll give me all of these different arguments as to why that's true. And then the second piece of where you see the confirmation bias is in the types of things they're willing to or not willing to invest in. And so, people, especially like ESG, environmental social governance type funds are really prevalent right now. But it's not new. People have always had, or there's been plenty of people that have had issues with tobacco, firearms, alcohol, energy, pharmaceuticals. I mean, and so they're comfortable owning something that owns the S&P 500, which will own the pharmaceutical company that they don't want to own, right? But they'll tell me why that makes sense.
Yeah, understood. And I'd imagine that even with tax policy, right, just to bring that into it,
yeah,
I'm sure you see a lot of the more political divide, right, come to the surface when we have a new administration. They're talking about different policy changes proposed, right? You kind of have people.
Yeah, to be fair though, I mean, most of the people I'm talking to are on one side of that issue, right? So yeah, so it's but yeah, absolutely. I think that you've got very strong feelings about that, and so I think I've mentioned in a previous podcast that I have a client who will call me at some point late July, early August to tell me that he lives in New York City. He's finally making money for himself. Well, I called him yesterday and told him that date just got pushed out to August 12th. So, because he's going to be, based on what we're currently seeing, in a 62.5%. And I found joy in calculating 365 by 0.625 and then applying it to what day that would actually land on the calendar. And he amazingly didn't find it as funny as I did. So now, what about you? So you must see this stuff, right? So I mean, you're not directly participating with clients on a daily basis.
Yeah.
But I'm,
but still working with people. Yeah.
Yeah. Still working with people. So
yeah.
What are you seeing?
I mean, I think I do see the tendency to go left or right, and some of these things come to the surface and leading to broader discussions about just societal stuff. Yeah. I don't know if confirmation bias plays into this, but I think there are other biases there. But I do see people with heavy concentrations in a certain stock, right? And they will monitor the performance of that stock, and when things are up, and they're kind of moving the mark on where they would want to sell, and they see it go up again. Okay, now we're still good. We're still good, even well into retirement. And I'm not sure if that really is necessarily confirmation bias purely. There's probably some anchoring involved or something like that.
But yeah, what do you mean by anchoring?
So yeah, I should clarify. So with anchoring, I have a price. Let's say I'm holding a stock. I have a price per share at which I am comfortable, and I would feel okay with selling that stock. So stock is currently at 95. When this stock goes up to 105, that's a point at which I feel comfortable that I can part with that. And I've seen people in retirement, having worked for a corporation, holding up to a fairly large concentration of company stock that they've acquired, and saying, hey, I said at 105 I would sell it. Things have changed because now I see it go up again. And now I'm going to anchor into a new point that's even higher.
Yeah. And yet, if you had approached them about owning any significant position in any other single equity, they would say you're out of your mind.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
So we were having a conversation a couple of weeks ago where I talked about. I was reminded. Right. So I really try to pride myself on being as unemotional as possible when I'm having these conversations with clients. I have a practice where I don't own any of the same things that I recommend to people, because I'm aware that I would become then cloaked in some sort of emotional attachment to the stock one way or the other, despite my best efforts. And so I really pride myself on not allowing the spookies to kind of come in and make me make bad decisions on stocks. And so I was going through a conversation where I had a client that wanted to buy something. And, again, one of my other passions, I think, that's become known on this is he was buying, not necessarily this one, he was buying beer. So he bought Sam Adams. And I was looking at, where it had been and where the values were. And, he was explaining to me the reasons why he wanted to own it. And I was like half listening to that. And, but he was dead on right. And I said, well, maybe we should wait for it to go down. I think it was $5 to $12 was the price that I was looking at. It's a $500 and something stock. And he said to me, in the grand scheme of things, aren't you the one that tells me that who cares one way or the other if we're worried about this 10 years from now? And it was, you realize, like, despite best efforts, I'm falling into a trap.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I got the friendly reminder, and then a very smug, like, he was very satisfied with himself after that. And then we just ended up buying the stock. So it's hard not to get wrapped up in
it. So as far as loss aversion, that was on that list as well, right? I'm sure there are times where this comes more to the surface. I'd imagine, I mean, for the past long stretch, right? If we kind of zoom out, was loss aversion a big deal in your practice with things just on the up and up on that massive bull run?
So what's funny in how I see it is, loss aversion is always there, right? Even my biggest client, they one of the things they say to me almost every time we're together is, well, just don't lose it. Well, I mean, that's the plan, right? Well, that's the plan, but just don't look at every statement. We'll be all right. What's funny is that I think right now what we're seeing the wrestling of is we're seeing people who have been patient to get in because they're having trouble looking at what they're seeing in the market and reconciling that to what they're looking out and seeing in day-to-day life in the economy. And they're saying, well, this thing's got to come down. Mm-hmm. So they wait. But it's like the kid kind of eyeing the Christmas present that's just been sitting there for 3 weeks. After a while, they just can't resist, right? There's such a fear of missing out that they start jumping in at the exact worst time. And so while loss aversion is there, and I agree with the study, and this is why I think that recency bias is more of a powerful impact than loss aversion, is because their eyes are telling them, you fool, you were wrong, and they gotta grab onto it. And again, that's typically why people end up buying high and selling low, which is really the opposite of what we're supposed to be doing.
Sure. I'd imagine that both from a practitioner's perspective and from the client's perspective, you're probably a little more aware of that at the point of retirement, right? Or like a couple months preceding because of sequence of returns. It's
what's amazing is, and I say this to everybody that I work with that's about to retire, is your first year of retirement is by far going to be the worst one for you. They don't believe it, right? But they start worrying about, and if we think about it, the discipline to save a bunch of money is just that. It's a discipline. And so you treat the money with sanctity, right? I'm not going to touch it. And if I touch it, if I have to touch it for something, I'm going to immediately replace it. And you're uncomfortable until that happens. So then to make that switch where instead of saving money, now you're spending your money, it immediately goes to, I'm going to, at 90 years old, I'm going to be eating cat food to survive and hugging people at Walmart because that's what I'll be left with, right? And so psychologically, it's very difficult for people who have saved so much for their entire life to turn that corner. And then they see at the end of the year that everything's okay. And again, it's one of the reasons why you have intervals with financial planning. Say, okay, well, this is where we thought we would be. This is where we actually are. The sun still comes up in the morning, and people move into the second year of retirement, which tends to, start the golden years.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen that with people right in that same zone, kind of on the cusp of retirement. I've seen it in a couple different ways. I think depending on their risk tolerance, that they were very under in terms of like how conservative they were approaching their retirement, just dialed it way back. I mean,
Yep.
to a point where they were way too safe leading up to it. And that same person also had kept a large sum of cash that she had inherited from her father, and kept it in her savings account, well above what she needed. Probably should have been invested a decade ago when she got it.
Yeah, but
And she would say repeatedly,
you needed to know.
yeah. Just, you know, and I found that fascinating, because I would point to it and say, well, that you have this cash here, and what's the plan for that? She's, oh, I love it. I love my cash. I'm not touching my
And
cash.
that's a big thing, right? So that's the I think that plays a little bit into the disposition effect, where it's, even if I lose it all, I still have this, right? I still have that safety net, that security blanket. And I see that a lot. It's a good point. I see it a lot with my clients. And you know what they do is once they know, you know, we say, well, I'll listen, anything more than whatever the right emergency fund is for their situation. Anything really beyond that is kind of inefficient. You know, there's other things we can do that's going to be better than cash. And so they keep it a secret. You know, they go and bury it because they don't want me to know. They don't want to hear about it, and they know they're going to. And there's nothing that I'm going to say that's going to convince them to put it into the market. And so they just pretend that it doesn't exist in front of me. You know, which is fine. I think it's funny. It is funny.
Yeah.
Because you hear about it when they get to, well, I also have this over here. So what do you mean you have this over here? You know, and it's just like, well, I was on a need to know basis, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I see it, and I'm curious to see whether or not you see this in yourself. I mean, your kids are younger than mine.
Yep.
But I have a 15-year-old son. He's a sophomore in high school. He starts college in a few years, and I put money away for him every year. And I've definitely started to think, do I want to put this money in now? Right? Do I, you know, because I know I'm going to need it at most in a couple of years, or I'm sorry, at least in a couple of years, but at most 6 years from now, if he goes through in 4 years. And so maybe it's better if I just kind of keep this on the side, because I do feel like maybe things are stretched a bit here. And once you see that, you can't unsee it.
Yeah, of course. I think with my girls, because they are young, because we have the longer time stretch. I mean, not by a whole lot, but they're 8 and 6.
Yeah.
I found that the regular smaller increments of contributions, the kind of set it and forget it mindset for them at this point, brings me peace. It brings me calm, because I don't need to think about it. I just know, all right, this was set up with this purpose, and that's part of the plan, and off we go.
We'll see if this is the way you feel 7 years from now.
It's true. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I was
we know one thing for sure. I mean, what is it? 5% per year, you know, 4.5% per year that education costs are increasing. I mean, I feel like I've been playing catch up since they were born. And trying to get
of course. I mean, well, college, I mean, rises. College makes the current inflation state look like nothing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so, and I'm sure there's universities saying, well, wait a minute, if inflation's at 5%, we should be at like 12, right? So, but I think that, you know, I do feel it. And then I have shame about it, where it's just like, I can't believe, you know, this is what I tell people not to do, and here I am doing it. And again, it reinforces, like, that's why I don't put my own money into stuff that I'm talking to clients about, because I know I can't separate my emotions from it. And then I'm no longer objective. I'm no longer their advisor. I'm on the boat with them.
Yeah.
Trying not to sink, you know?
I find that so interesting, because I've talked to other advisors that are on the exact opposite end. They're like,
absolutely, most people are.
We cook, you know.
So I'm flying my own plane and blah blah blah, and I get it. Like that's fine. That's fine. Yeah. But you know, it's like my wife was a nurse, and so, you know, she went from having no problems about anything. You know, she'd stick her hands in dirt and then in her mouth, and then she took microbiology, and you know, we became a stockpiler of peroxide, so I think it's once you understand that these things are out there, I think you become painfully aware.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that though. I feel like you're probably just able to bring yourself to a place where you are giving that, as true to the solution as you can be without getting pulled by all the ups and downs of it, right? That you're just giving the best advice in the moment to solve the problem, to move toward the goal.
It's like the investing namaste. Is that
yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think it's great.
I mean, it feels that way.
I like that.
I kind of walk out of it during crisis, and again, it's been to my deficit. I don't. I think if clients took a look at my portfolio, they'd say, really? And it is what it is. I mean, it looks deficient compared to what I do for them. And so, but it's really, interestingly, it's difficult to have your money managed by somebody else. Because I would do that if I had somebody that, there's a few people that I trust closely, and I would let them do it, but it's not easy for me to do that from a compliance standpoint.
Okay. Yeah. Understood.
There's different rules that set in. So when we talk about, interesting, what we talked about, the three most common biases that advisors see in their clients. When it comes to seeing the biases in themselves, 97% say I have absolutely no biases at all. No, I'm
97.
I'm kidding. No, so when they say, okay, well, the biases that you perceive in your own advice and your own approach to the business and the things that you're making decisions on, what are those that are the top? The first is loss aversion, which we said was second for clients. The second, now this is an amazing concession from people, because this is an ego business. And I think there's a lot of ego in this business. And the second thing that they admitted to was overconfidence. So that is like, wow, as introspective as I think you're going to get out of the industry.
Agreed.
And then the third thing is confirmation bias. So the one that is the outlier that we saw, that they said they saw in clients that they don't really see in themselves, at least in the top three, is recency bias. And again, as you were saying before, I think it's probably not necessarily true, especially now. I mean, I think that recency bias and confirmation bias can come together, and they manifested themselves in what we were seeing with some of the meme stocks, where you got people that believe, well, these things they can't possibly stand on their own. And then you've got other parts of the world that are saying it's all a conspiracy, and then we're going to bring the whole house down. And, and it doesn't get much further apart than that, but people feel very strongly about both sides of that issue.
Yeah. I wonder, I mean, there's some sort of recency effect, right? With the meme stocks and with cryptocurrency and all of these things, right? They seem just more in the mainstream publications. And I've had conversations with people, and I'm surprised it goes there that quickly. I remember being at a kindergarten mini golf birthday party, and the host, it was blessed. Somehow along the way, as an aside, I think the other parents were enjoying themselves. I was the guy fishing all of the balls out of the little water trap. And then there was a line of kids. And I was like, I was just trying to help out my little group. But, for a good 15 minutes, I was fishing the water, the balls out of the water. Anyway. But yeah, they, said, what do you do? And we got to know each other. And they're like, so what about this crypto stuff? And I mean, right to it. And just in hindsight, that just seems like a recency effect. Like, this is just the last big thing in finance I've heard about. And it's such a hot topic.
Right.
Yeah.
When I get it with my undergraduate students, and I really have for, I want to say, at least 7 years now, where it's a big thing. And they look at me like when I say I don't get it, like I just don't get it. They look at me like I am absolutely crazy and like older than Nostradamus, right? Like I just like
Unbelievable.
it's you know, I'm not a boomer, but I am to them, right? It's just like
Sure.
I see like the okay boomer like in their eyes, and I just don't get it. And so, but you know, what's interesting about the fact that advisors don't see themselves as really being suffering from recency bias. Do you know what the one of the hottest market initiatives, or one of the things that it's hard not to to describe this without actually saying what it is, but one of the big places that money's flowing to?
No.
Trend following. Right.
Oh,
So
yeah.
Trend following, momentum investment, right?
Yeah.
That's the very core of recency bias.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So it's just it's funny how you have those contradictions in things. So, you know, I think that this is as interesting a time in terms of being able to. It feels like not necessarily the same as 2008, but it feels like the 2009. Like once we bottomed, people didn't believe the bottom. Like right now, I feel like people don't believe it's the top, and it may not be, right. Who knows? Tops are harder, I think, to really see them than bottoms tend to be. And so this feels like that did, where I feel like I know people are kind of putting themselves in a position to do the wrong thing, and I'm trying hard to minimize the damage, but it's more difficult this time. Up markets are harder to fight than down markets.
That's interesting. Yeah. I feel like people that have gone through that cycle, right, probably feel that way, where you know there's the other side to this. But I wonder if you're going through this for the first time as an adult, right? I just remember '08 vividly. And I remember where I was standing. I was with colleagues, you know, in financial services. We're watching the thing go down and plummet. And then the fallout from that, and working for a big broker dealer at the time. I mean, not only wondering about your job security, but what is this fair for the economy overall? What on earth is happening?
Yeah, I mean, the banks are going to get nationalized, and
yeah.
You know, the government had to step in and back every penny that was in a money market account. You know, above, like, that's not even like every cent. The trillions don't seem like a lot of money anymore, but back then it seemed like a lot of money. And it's just like, you know, trillions of dollars. I think it was $11 trillion in money market at that point. They came in and they were going to back every cent of it. You know, and it was more of just a functional window dressing type thing to make people feel better about it. But yeah, I mean, it was a crazy time. And this feels, again, it's like the yin and the yang. Like this feels the exact mirror opposite of that. Mm-hmm. Where people are, you know, I think back coming out of the financial crisis, people realized we weren't going over into the abyss that it looked like we could have, but they were still very hesitant to get back into the game.
Yeah.
And now I think people feel like, you know, maybe we're whistling past the graveyard here a little bit, but they can't not throw their money. It's like the fly going into the light. Like they can't not do it. And so no one ever says, you know, well, I would have only lost 10% more, but people say, well, I could have had 10% more, right? It's just a different.
Oh yeah.
It's a different perspective.
I wonder how, you know, in this past decade or so, right? Decade plus a couple years, we have instant access, a lot of do-it-yourselfers out there that are investing, right? Where this has been the way it goes. I mean, it's just everything is looking up. I wonder what's going to happen when there's a significant correction and how it plays out in that space. Are people still interested in buying in at that point? Are they going to put it on pause? Do they get a little frightened? I mean, how does that play out for your do-it-yourself investor that's for 3 years in?
For 50% of them, it's going to be confirmation of their confirmation bias. Right. So you're going to have half of Reddit that was like, see, we were right. And half of Reddit saying, you know, damn it, we should have done the other thing. And that's just it. Like to your point, there's just so much. There's so many places that there's just a copious amounts of analysis and information. And you know, it's like same thing with I have a friend who's a doctor, and he said the best thing that ever happened to my practice was WebMD. Because you go there for a hangnail and you're dying, right? And so you go to the doctor. It's the same thing with, you can get your way to whatever outcome you're looking for on the just a sundry of message boards that are out there. You've got all these platforms, and every single one of them has both sides of the outcome, and plenty of it. And it's just, you can go immerse yourself in whichever of those two. You can go bathe in either side, and feel very confident that you've done all the analysis you possibly can to prove yourself right.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, it is wild. It should be. I'm just going to keep an eye on the space and keep my own biases in check.
Yeah, it is. It is a hard thing to do, and I feel like, and it's tough. I can tell you that as confident as I was in the advice that I was giving during any time of crisis, but specifically the 2008, 2009. It was hard to stick to your guns, right? It's very hard to, especially like when you're like, now the right thing to do, let's not worry about, the next few months, let's worry about years out. And then, fast forward 3 months and the statements show them down another 12%. They eventually tire of that advice. They can't, when you see it actually on paper, it's harder for them to stick to the plan.
Yeah.
And more
do you see a lot of people back then where they just had their firm line. I will not let this go below here before jumping ship.
It wasn't as much, at least in my experience, it wasn't a set number.
Yeah.
It was like the what amount of pain could they handle? Right. They got it to the point where I had clients that would call me and say, listen, I know it's not the right thing to do. I know it's not. I can see that. I just can't take it anymore. Mm-hmm. And so you just get them to take it for one more day and hope that there's an up day, which there wasn't a lot of those back then. But we saw it similarly with the pandemic. The onset of the pandemic was, it was just so unprecedented. Where they're shutting the economy down indefinitely. And I still to this day am amazed how short-lived that downturn actually was.
Yeah, same here.
It's just, in looking at it, that would seem like it would be very sticky, like a very persistent thing. And I don't know what you thought, but I thought this is a problem. This is going to be a problem for a little while. Because we've got this thing that's killing people, and we haven't even started figuring out a medicine for it.
Yeah.
And that takes. I've owned pharmaceutical companies. I know how long it takes to get a drug through, and I was thinking like, well, this can't be good.
Yeah.
And so it was hard to get people to just, hey, we'll tuck away the money that you need for the next couple of years, but we're not going to worry about this stuff 10 years out.
Sure.
But again, I had the benefit of having these clients, having gone through a couple of these with me now. I think if you're brand new, or if you are dealing with newer clients, those conversations are probably more difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, so how in your experience, in those moments where things are really tumultuous, they're plummeting, people are losing their money, how much do some of our historical facts with performance, does that provide any ease, or is it more just like, I'm hurting right now?
So let me ask you as an investor, right?
Yeah.
Does it, in being steeped in knowledge of finance, does it help you?
Barely.
Okay. Well, so why?
Yeah. I don't want to say barely. The losses. I find that I don't want to look at statements, where I think it's a lot more enjoyable to look at a statement where things have gone up 12%.
Yeah.
And I think that's human. That just to what you were speaking to also, like things are on the up and I'm feeling great. I take that back. Yeah. That makes me feel a little bit of calm looking long-term. But it also raises other things, the uncertainty of what lies ahead, to bring things full circle. Like, how is this going to play out? Is this something different? Were we in the right place? Do we have things properly set up here? Those are all things that go through my mind. But I know, yeah, markets overall, right? Dating way back. What is it? Every slice of 10, you could take a 10-year slice, and it's about.
It's hard to find a down rolling 10-year period.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And you think about some of the things that happen within any given 10-year period, like major crisis, world wars, depressions, now pandemics, terrorist attacks. And yes, if as long as there's enough time applied to the portfolio, chances are it's going to be up.
Yeah.
Right.
How do you feel in moments like that? Does that give you any calm?
Yeah, it does. So I'm I try to be as pragmatic and as objective as possible. And I think, when in knowing the history, I know that it's not, it's the two things that I really take comfort in is it's not going to zero, right? And if it does go to zero, it doesn't matter anyway, right? So if it goes to zero, we're burning furniture to stay alive. And no one's going to worry about what their statement looks like then, because they're going to put them on top of the fire to stay warm for the night. And those statements they'll be robust because they're like 50 pages thick. But yeah, I do find that there's comfort in that. And I also, someone told me very early on in my career that the 4 most expensive words in investing are "this time is different," and so taking solace in the fact that despite how awful or how great things look, they just don't. We're not in linear markets. They don't persist that way forever. And so in good times they're going to turn around. In bad times they'll also turn around. We definitely tend to feel more pain from downside than we feel benefit from upside. And so you have to have a little bit of that as well, or you have to be aware of that. But in general, I take comfort in the fact that they haven't found a way to put it to zero yet. They're working in earnest right now, though, I think. But you have to trust the people that are smarter than me. You gotta. I believe that our policymakers, especially when we look at the Fed, are brilliant people with the best interests of the economy and the country and society as a whole at heart. And so I think that I tend to take comfort in that as well.
Yeah. Well, probably a good place for us to put this on pause and revisit down the road, maybe if things change.
Well, they always change. That's the benefit of talking about behavioral. We can always point to it and say, well, wait a minute, we were just looking at the wrong bias.
Yeah. But yeah, thanks for bringing that study to our attention. I think it's a great springboard into this. And I know you and I have dialogued just about how we each find this really interesting and fascinating, and just seeing how it plays out both in ourselves and in clients, and in the world of financial information is always something to keep an eye on. So
I think it's just important to understand that there's a slew of these biases out there. Just because the top 3 are the ones that their advisors see as the top 3, it doesn't mean they're the top 3 for you. Everyone, because of upbringing, because of experience, because of age, because of a million different things, these biases will have different pecking orders in their own life. And you can concede to them, learn from them, and then have a plan to not let them derail you.
Thank you all for listening. The complete Biff Bites podcast library can be found at biffbites.com. Send any questions in to info@biffbites.com. Take care.